Let us gather in the strange twilight of our modern age, for the air is thick with voices, 1,000 clamors rising at once, as though the collective unconscious itself had been wired into a machine and given a loudspeaker. What you call social media is not merely a technological invention, it is a psychic event. It is a projection of our own inner chaos, magnified upon a stage where billions of eyes are present but few hearts are listening. You may believe this world of instant messages, of outrage and applause is new, but I tell you, I foresaw its shadow long before the glowing screen was ever conceived, for I knew that whenever humanity invents a new medium to carry its words, what rises to the surface first is not wisdom, but shadow. Consider this. Each man and woman carries within a multitude of voices. The persona smiles, polite and presentable, while beneath it, the repressed shadow waits with clenched teeth and burning eyes. In the private sphere, these forces were once contained, managed within the small boundaries of family, village, and tribe. But when humanity discovered a forum without boundaries, limitless in reach and instantaneous in power, the shadow was given a microphone. What you see as online outrage is not new hatred, not new indignation, but the old unprocessed shadow finally given a stage on which to dance. It is no coincidence that this outrage spreads like wildfire. Archetypes dwell within you, the trickster, the martyr, the hero, the scapegoat. They hunger for enactment, and the social platforms with their endless scroll are arenas where these ancient archetypes leap forth. The crowd demands a sacrifice, and so a scapegoat is chosen. A single sentence, a misstep, a word torn from context, and the mob gathers, not with torches and pitchforks, but with hashtags and furious reposts. It is the same ritual of collective purification that burned witches and stoned sinners, only now digitized, electrified, made constant. The form has changed, but the psychic mechanism remains untouched. Do you not see the psychological irony? Each individual, secure in the belief that their indignation is righteous, casts their shadow upon another. They declare, here is the guilty one, here is the sinner, the corrupter, the fool. And in that cry, they forget that what they hate most in the other is the very thing they have refused to face in themselves. Outrage becomes a drug, a temporary absolution. For if I can condemn another publicly, then I need not confess my own darkness privately. I tell you, this outrage is not merely anger, it is projection on a colossal scale. The unconscious contents of millions are vomited into the collective air. And in the digital storm, people mistake their shadow for truth. You scroll, and each story is an archetypal play. A victim cries out, an oppressor is revealed. The crowd swarms in fury, and then silence until the next sacrifice is chosen. Does it not resemble the ancient Colosseum, where the masses demanded blood to appease their restless souls? Yet, we must not despise this phenomenon entirely, for it is also a revelation. The unconscious always seeks manifestation, and when society refuses to engage its shadow consciously, it bursts forth through unintended channels. The rise of this global outrage reveals to us how desperately we have avoided introspection. Instead of descending into our own depths, we prefer to scream into the void, hoping the echo will drown out the whisper of the soul. Ask yourself, why does outrage feel so satisfying? Why does the condemnation of another pulse with such vitality? It is because you are feeding upon archetypal fire. Outrage unites you with the tribe. It grants you the illusion of moral superiority. It momentarily silences the gnawing voice of your own inadequacy. But like any drug, it fades quickly, leaving only hunger for the next target. In my visions, I once saw humanity entangled in a net of invisible threads, each thread vibrating with the thoughts of millions. Now, you have woven that net yourselves, and you call it social media. The psyche cannot be mocked. What is ignored in the soul will reappear in the world. And so the collective unconscious, denied its ritual, its myth, its sacred vessel, has erupted into the marketplace of posts and comments. The danger, however, is not simply the outrage itself. The danger is identification. If you believe the storm of outrage is the voice of truth, then you become possessed. Archetypes do not politely request. They seize. A person overtaken by the righteous archetype believes themselves the sword of justice, blind to the shadow they wield. In this way, entire societies can be consumed by frenzy, convinced they are purging evil while they themselves enact it. Reflect upon history. The French Revolution began with noble cries for liberty, but soon the guillotine devoured friend and foe alike. The archetype of justice, once awakened, could not be tamed. Social media outrage is a quieter guillotine, yet it can be just as merciless, destroying reputations, careers, even lives, and the crowd cheers, unaware that tomorrow the blade may fall upon their own necks. But do not despair, for within every eruption of shadow lies the possibility of consciousness. Outrage reveals what society fears to face. The fury directed outward is always a mirror of an inward poverty. If humanity learns to see in outrage not only the guilt of another, but also the reflection of its own darkness, then this crisis becomes initiation. Social media could be not merely a marketplace of fury, but a mirror in which humanity learns to behold its soul. You see, outrage is not a disease, it is the symptom. The disease is disconnection from the inner life. People who no longer listen to their dreams, who no longer confront their fears in solitude, will seek their psychic fire in the collective arena. The dream was once the private conversation between man and the divine. Now, the tweet has replaced it. But the hunger is the same. And so I say to you, if you wish to understand the rise of outrage, you must descend into the archetypal roots. Within you lives the avenger, the judge, the exile, the orphan. These figures demand attention. If ignored, they seize the machinery of culture. Social media outrage is the unconscious drama of billions externalized, because it was never internalized. It is humanity acting out its shadow on the largest stage ever built, close your eyes for a moment and imagine you dream of standing before a vast crowd. And they point at you, screaming. You feel terror, shame, helplessness. Yet, when you awaken, you dismiss it. But if such a dream were yours, I would ask, what part of you is on trial? What hidden guilt within demands recognition? In truth, society itself is dreaming such a dream each day upon its digital platforms. Only it has mistaken the dream for reality. The outrage is dream imagery. Projected outward, the psyche speaks in symbols, and the world has become a symbolic theater. To awaken is to recognize the symbol, to refuse possession, to reclaim the shadow as one's own, for until you do, you are not free. And thus, I tell you, I predicted this not because I foresaw technology, but because I knew the soul. Wherever the soul is unacknowledged, it finds expression through the shadow. Outrage is but the modern mask of the eternal archetype of judgment. And unless you learn to see the face behind the mask, the storm will not cease. When I speak of projection, you must understand it not as an abstract concept, but as a living serpent that slithers silently from your unconscious, seeking a victim upon which to coil. In the ancient world, this serpent was encountered in dreams, myths, and rituals. Today, the serpent has found a new hunting ground. With every flicker of a screen, it leaps outward, striking through comments, posts, and accusations. And the more unconscious a person is, the more powerful the serpent becomes, for it thrives on denial. Have you noticed how quickly outrage spreads? It takes but seconds for millions to unite in fury, as if bound by an invisible thread. This is no accident. It is the collective unconscious vibrating at once. The unconscious is timeless, spaceless, and when a symbol ignites it, the contagion is instantaneous. Outrage is not passed merely through wires and algorithms. It is carried by archetypal resonance, like a bell struck in one village that can be heard in the next. The archetype reverberates across souls. But what is truly feared in this spectacle, it is not the guilty act itself, for acts of cruelty and foolishness have always existed. What is feared is contamination. The crowd believes that by purging the guilty one, they protect their own purity. Yet this, my friends, is superstition of the oldest kind. It is the psychology of the plague village, where one victim is cast out, so the sickness might not spread. Social media has resurrected the ancient ritual of scapegoating in digital disguise. When the crowd cries out in indignation, do you not hear the echo of biblical mobs, demanding release of Barabbas while condemning the silent one? The archetype is unchanged. Outrage is not modern, it is primordial. The only difference is that today it is global, instant, and mercilessly permanent, for the digital record is a new stone tablet upon which sins are etched forever. Now let us descend deeper. Outrage, as it is experienced collectively, is a defense against the unbearable humanity carries within an ocean of shadow, anger, envy, lust, cowardice. To look into this ocean is terrifying. And so, instead, the crowd prefers to project these waters onto a single figure, declaring, this one is corrupt, this one is hateful, this one is evil. In truth, it is the collective saying, we refuse to face our own corruption, our own hatred, our own evil. Social media is not the creator of this refusal, but it has become its amplifier. And what of the individual caught in this storm, the accused, the shamed, the one sacrificed? They are playing an archetypal role. The scapegoat, it is a role older than civilization itself. The scapegoat absorbs the darkness of the tribe and is cast into the wilderness so that the community may feel cleansed. Yet the tragedy of our age is that scapegoats are endlessly multiplied. There is no wilderness vast enough to contain them. The more victims are cast out, the more restless the crowd becomes. For the shadow is never truly gone. It remains haunting each accuser in silence. Ask yourself honestly, have you not felt the thrill of joining the chorus? Have you not felt, even secretly, the satisfaction of seeing another fall? This is the shadow's triumph. It disguises vengeance as justice, envy as morality. If you cannot face this within yourself, then you are already possessed. The archetype of possession is central here. Outrage is not simply chosen, it seizes you. When you find yourself scrolling endlessly, heart pounding, fingers itching to respond, know that you are no longer wholly yourself. You are an instrument of a force far older than technology. You are a vessel of the collective unconscious, and unless you awaken, you will be consumed. But is there redemption in this? Yes, always, for the psyche is merciful, even in its cruelty. Outrage, when examined, becomes revelation. It shows you what you hate most in others, which is precisely what you deny most in yourself. Each wave of outrage is an invitation not to condemn, but to reflect, not to accuse, but to confess. Outrage could be a path to individuation, if one dares to use it as a mirror rather than a weapon. Do not misunderstand me. I do not say injustice should be ignored. Real evils exist, and they must be confronted. But when justice is mixed with shadow, it ceases to be justice and becomes frenzy. Social media outrage does not seek truth, it seeks catharsis. It is the ritual of purging, not the pursuit of wisdom. To stand against true injustice requires calmness, patience, and clarity. To join the mob requires only a spark of anger, and so the mob always grows while the wise voice is drowned. In this, the danger to civilization is immense. For when societies mistake shadow-possessed outrage for moral truth, they lose their ability to discern. They destroy nuance, silence dialogue, and eventually devour their own foundations. What began as righteous fire becomes indiscriminate flames. I warned long ago that modern man risks being overtaken by the unconscious. This digital age has made that warning more urgent than ever. Imagine, if you will, a dream in which you wander through a city at night. The streets are filled with mirrors, each one reflecting not your own face, but distorted images of strangers, some monstrous, some angelic. You feel both fascination and fear. Suddenly the mirrors shatter, and the shards cut your skin. You awaken in panic, What would I tell you of this dream? That the city is the internet, the mirrors are projections, and the shattering is the moment when fantasy collapses into violence? The dream is already reality, played out daily on your glowing screens, and yet I am not without hope. For every psychic crisis holds within it the seed of renewal. Outrage reveals to us that the collective soul is restless, unsatisfied, wounded. It reveals our thirst for meaning, for justice, for communion. If humanity learns to turn inward rather than outward, to confront the shadow rather than hurl it, then even this storm could become initiation. Outrage could become the spark that drives a generation into the depths of its own unconscious. But this requires courage. It requires that you stand apart from the mob, that you listen not to the shouts of the crowd, but to the whisper of your dreams. The individuation process is always lonely, always demanding. To resist the collective possession of outrage is to risk isolation, yet this is the price of consciousness. You cannot awaken while clutching the safety of the mob. You must walk into the wilderness alone, carrying the knowledge that the scapegoat cast out is also a part of yourself. Hear me, the rise of social media outrage is not merely a technological trend. It is the collective unconscious crying out for recognition. It is a symptom of neglected inner work. It is the shadow demanding to be seen. And if humanity continues to ignore this demand, the storm will only intensify. But if, instead, you learn to see in every wave of outrage a mirror of your own hidden depths, then the digital age may yet become a doorway to individuation on a scale never before imagined. This is the choice before you: projection or reflection, possession or consciousness, outrage as frenzy, or outrage as revelation. The archetypes are stirring, the serpent has uncoiled, and the stage is vast. The question is not whether the outrage will rise, it already has. The question is whether you will awaken in its midst to penetrate deeper into the mystery of this outrage. You must see that it is not only psychological but also spiritual. For the collective unconscious is not merely a storehouse of forgotten instincts, it is the dwelling place of the archetypes, those timeless patterns of human experience that carry within them both divinity and destruction. When you witness a digital storm, you are witnessing a ritual without priests, a liturgy without temples. Humanity is still religious, though it denies it. The sacred impulse has not vanished. It has only migrated into new disguises. And so the altar is now the glowing screen. The prayer is the post. The sacrament is the like, and the excommunication is the cancellation. Do you not see that you are living in a religion disguised as secular outrage? Every age has its myths. In the ancient world, the myth of the hero guided men to face the dragon. In the Middle Ages, the myth of Christendom united souls under the symbol of the cross. Today, the myth that governs you is the myth of visibility. To be unseen is to be non-existent. To be ignored is to be damned. Thus, outrage is not only fury, it is a cry to be seen, to be acknowledged, to exist in the eyes of the great other, that is the collective. Outrage is the offering made to the God of visibility. For through it, one proves their belonging to the moral tribe. But beware, for every myth that rises carries within it a shadow, The myth of visibility has birthed the shadow of surveillance, and the God who sees all is merciless. In the temple of social media, nothing is forgotten, nothing forgiven. The mistakes of youth, the words spoken in ignorance, the impulsive jest, all are carved into eternity, ready to be unearthed when the mob demands fresh sacrifice. This, too, I foresaw that a civilization which forgets mercy will create a machine that remembers everything. And yet, outrage persists, not because it is purely destructive, but because it gives temporary meaning. The individual, lost in anonymity, feels the thrill of significance when they join the storm. For a moment, they are part of something vast, something righteous, something larger than their own insignificance. This is the hunger of the soul, twisted, yes, but not meaningless. It is the cry of the orphan archetype, abandoned in a vast universe, longing for communion. Outrage is the counterfeit of communion, the false fire that mimics true belonging. Do you recall the myths of Dionysus in his rites? The crowd was overtaken by frenzy, tearing apart the chosen victim, believing this violence would renew them. That frenzy lives again in your feeds and timelines. It is Dionysian possession disguised in modern clothing. The victim changes, the stage changes, but the archetypal ritual remains. The human soul cannot escape its ancient patterns. It can only enact them unconsciously or consciously. Outrage is the unconscious enactment of ritual sacrifice in a secular age. But I say to you, the unconscious does not rise without purpose. It rises because you have forgotten how to integrate it. Outrage reveals that you no longer have true rights, true myths, true symbols that guide the dark energies of the soul. Where is your initiation into adulthood? Where is your communal mourning of death? Where are your sacred rituals of confession and forgiveness? Stripped of these, the psyche invents its own, and it does so through the tools at hand. Outrage is the ritual invented by a culture that has lost its rights. I do not condemn technology, for it is only the vessel. What I warn of is unconsciousness. To build a tool without the wisdom to wield it is to place fire in the hands of children. Social media has given humanity godlike power, the power to speak to millions, to destroy with words, to exalt with symbols, but without individuation, without self-knowledge. This power is devoured by the shadow. Thus, the outrage will not stop until the individual begins to awaken. Let us turn inward for a moment. If you were to dream of a mob screaming, pointing, condemning, would you not recognize that these are aspects of your own psyche? The accuser, the accused, the crowd, the silence, all are within you. To interpret the dream is to see that the outrage is not only outside but within. Each time you condemn another without reflection, you reenact the dream. Each time you are seized by fury at a stranger, you are seeing your own hidden reflection. The unconscious has no patience for ignorance. It will mirror your shadow back at you until you dare to face it. Therefore, the rise of outrage is both tragedy and opportunity. It is tragedy because it tears apart individuals, destroys dialogue, and feeds the frenzy of the masses. But it is opportunity because it forces into visibility what has long been hidden, It shows you the hunger for meaning, the addiction to projection, the fear of invisibility, the absence of ritual. These are not small insights. They are revelations of the collective psyche, if only you would dare to see them as such. The question then is, will you remain possessed? Or will you awaken? To awaken means to recognize outrage as symbol, not reality. It means to see the archetype at play and refuse to be its puppet. It means to withdraw projection, to say the evil I condemn in them is also in me. Only then does individuation begin. For the path of the soul is not to join the mob, but to walk into the wilderness of one's own unconscious, where the true trial awaits. Yes, I predicted the rise of outrage, for I knew the shadow would find its way into the new technologies of communication. But prediction is not destiny. Fate reveals itself so that freedom may arise. What you do with this revelation is your choice. Will you remain chained to the storm, or will you use the storm as a mirror to know yourself? Outrage will continue to surge, but within each wave is the possibility of awakening, if only you dare to look within. If you have followed me this far, you will have sensed that what I describe is not merely an analysis of society, but a warning for the soul. Outrage is the symptom, but the disease is deeper. It is the severing of man from his own depths, the refusal to enter the underworld of the psyche. Outrage is the fever that tells us the body is sick. Yet instead of turning inward for healing, humanity has mistaken the fever for virtue, celebrating its own illness as though it were health. The collective shadow is no tame beast. It is ancient, cunning, patient. It lurks behind every righteous cry, waiting for the moment when justice becomes cruelty, when truth becomes weapon, when solidarity becomes tyranny. The rise of digital outrage has shown us how swiftly the shadow can seize entire populations. For the soul of modern man is unrooted, deprived of myth, stripped of ritual. He clings to the collective like a drowning man to driftwood. And the collective, once possessed, offers no safety, only storm. You ask, what then shall we do? Shall we abandon the machines, silence the networks, flee into forests, to escape the roar of the mob? No, for the psyche does not yield to escape. What is avoided returns, more ferocious. The answer is not retreat, but consciousness, to enter these arenas with awareness, to see each storm as symbol, each outrage as mirror, each victim as reflection of your own forgotten wound. Outrage is the dream image of a society that has fallen asleep. To awaken, you must read it as dream. Imagine again a dream in which you walk through endless corridors lined with doors. Behind each door, voices shout, accuse, scream. You open one door, and the crowd within points to you, condemns you. You open another, and you join the mob, shouting against another figure. The dream terrifies you until you realize all these doors are within your own mind. The mob, the accused, the accuser, the silent one, they are all you. This is the truth of social media. It is not a separate world, but an externalization of the psyche. The corridors are endless because the psyche itself is vast, To interpret this dream is to recognize that the outrage is not outside of you, but a mirror of your own fragmentation. Thus, the true revolution is not technological, but psychological. You may regulate platforms, invent algorithms, build laws, but unless the individual confronts his own shadow, the storm will persist in new forms. The unconscious cannot be silenced by decree. It can only be transformed by recognition. Outrage will continue until men and women learn to descend into themselves, to face the hidden dragon, to integrate the darkness, instead of projecting it. But do not think this task is easy. To stand against the mob is to risk exile. To confess your shadow in a culture addicted to projection is to appear guilty, even when you are only human. Yet this is the path of individuation. The Christ archetype teaches us the one who bears the shadow of the world is crucified by it. To integrate your shadow is to endure the same exile, to stand alone in the wilderness of your own depths. But beyond the exile lies resurrection, the wholeness of the self, the union of opposites. My friends, I have always said one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Outrage is the darkness of our time, a collective eruption of unintegrated shadow. To participate unconsciously is to feed the darkness. To resist unconsciously is to repress it further. But to behold it consciously, to use it as symbol, as mirror, as teacher, that is to transform it. Look within yourself. Ask, what do I condemn most fiercely in others? What sparks my outrage? If you are honest, you will find that the answer reveals what you have most refused to see in yourself. Perhaps it is cowardice, perhaps vanity, perhaps cruelty. Whatever it is, the world will reflect it to you until you accept it, integrate it, and redeem it. Outrage is relentless because the psyche is relentless in its pursuit of wholeness. And so, let us conclude with this. I did not predict the rise of social media outrage because I was a prophet of technology, but because I knew the patterns of the soul. The psyche repeats itself in every age. Only the masks change. Today the mask is digital, glowing, swift. Tomorrow it will be something else. But the archetypes remain eternal. The shadow remains inevitable. The self remains the hidden goal. Do not be deceived by the noise of the crowd. The real battle is always within. The true scapegoat is always the shadow you have not faced. The outrage of the age is a summons not to join the mob, but to descend into yourself. If you have the courage to do so, then the storm becomes initiation, the chaos becomes teacher, and even outrage becomes the pathway to wholeness. Hear me, the fate of civilization does not rest upon platforms or politics, but upon the capacity of individuals to confront their own darkness. If you learn to see in each wave of outrage a reflection of your own unconscious, then you will awaken. And if enough awaken, then the storm will no longer be destruction, but transformation. This is what I leave you with, a vision of a humanity that no longer fears its shadow, no longer projects its fury outward, but integrates it, transfigures it, and becomes whole. For only the whole human being can withstand the storm of the age, and only through wholeness can we walk into the future. no longer possessed, but conscious, no longer enslaved to outrage, but free.